My terrifying gas station experience that made me leave immediately. It was an ordinary Saturday evening when I found myself alone on a winding country road in Northern California. I'd been traveling for hours, driving from a friend's wedding back to my apartment in San Francisco. The GPS had routed me through a remote part of the state to avoid the highway traffic. And for the first hour, I didn't mind. The scenery was beautiful, all rolling hills and towering trees, dark against the twilight sky. But as night fell, the atmosphere shifted, and the once picturesque landscape started to feel isolated and eerie. The road was narrow and empty. The only light came from my headlights cutting through the darkness, illuminating patches of the road ahead before they quickly vanished behind me. The sky was clouded, hiding the stars, and a low fog began to roll in, thickening with each mile. I checked my GPS again. No signal. My stomach tightened slightly, but I told myself it was nothing. I'd be back on a main road soon. About an hour later, I noticed the gas gauge was dipping dangerously close to empty. I cursed myself for not filling up before leaving town. But when I saw a small gas station sign up ahead, my relief was immediate. The station looked like something out of an old movie, faded and worn down, with a single rusty pump under a dim, flickering light. But beggars can't be choosers, I thought. I pulled in, parking beside the lone pump. I stepped out, and the night air was colder than I'd expected, carrying a strange smell, something metallic, like old machinery. I scanned the area but didn't see anyone. The small station building had one light on, casting an eerie yellow glow through a dusty window. But there was no sign of an attendant. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but I brushed it off as paranoia. I swiped my card, but the machine beeped and flashed a message: "See attendant inside." With a sigh, I walked to the station's door, pulling it open to the ding of an old-fashioned bell. The smell hit me immediately, a damp, musty odor mixed with something else. Something sharp and unsettling. I hesitated, but my need for gas pushed me inside. The interior was dim, filled with a strange assortment of items that looked untouched for years: outdated snacks, dust-covered souvenirs, and a few cracked shelves of motor oil. It was as if time had stopped in this place, leaving everything frozen in a layer of grime. Then, I noticed him. A man stood behind the counter, staring at me with a blank expression. He was older, maybe in his 60s, with a grizzled beard and sunken eyes that seemed to follow my every move. "Need some gas?" he asked in a voice so quiet it was almost a whisper. "Yes," I replied, forcing a polite smile despite the unease creeping over me. The pump said to see the attendant. He nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving me. "Pump's been finicky lately," he said. "Only works if I activate it from here." "How much you need?" "Just enough to get me back to the main road," I said, shifting on my feet. I could feel his eyes lingering, and the urge to leave grew stronger, my instincts clawing at me. But I handed him a 20 and watched as he rang it up with deliberate slowness, his bony fingers lingering on the buttons. As he handed me my change, he leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. "Be careful out there," he said, his tone strange, almost warning. "People go missing around these parts." The words hit me like ice water. I offered a weak nod, muttering a quick, "Thanks," before I turned and practically bolted back outside. My heart was racing, and every fiber of my being screamed at me to get in my car and leave as quickly as possible. But when I reached the pump, I froze. Another car had pulled into the station, a battered old truck, dark and silent. I hadn't heard it arrive. It was just there, parked a few yards away, and I could see a figure in the driver's seat, watching me. The figure didn't move, didn't attempt to get out or go inside, just sat there, the shadow of a person barely visible in the dim light. My pulse pounded in my ears as I forced myself to stay calm, quickly filling the tank while keeping my eyes on the car. The seconds stretched, each one feeling heavier than the last, and I was acutely aware of how alone I was out here, with no cell signal and miles from any main road. As soon as the gas pump clicked, I replaced the nozzle and climbed back into my car, locking the doors immediately. I glanced back toward the building and noticed the man at the counter was watching me through the window, his face barely visible but unmistakably fixated on me. I shifted into gear, but as I pulled away, the truck's headlights snapped on. My stomach dropped. The truck didn't move at first, but as I sped up, so did it, following me onto the road. My mind raced, trying to stay rational, but the panic was setting in fast. The road was dark and winding, and every glance in the rearview mirror showed the truck's headlights, unwavering, following every turn I made. After several miles, I spotted a dirt road branching off to the right. Without thinking, I swerved onto it, hoping the truck would pass me by. For a few seconds, I held my breath, watching as the headlights continued down the main road. Relief flooded me, but it was short-lived. I realized I was now on an even narrower road, deeper in the woods with no idea where it led. I drove slowly, scanning the area for any sign of civilization, but it was just trees and darkness pressing in on all sides. Then, a light appeared up ahead. It was faint, barely visible through the trees, but it was something. I edged closer, my heart pounding, until I realized it was a house. A lone cabin nestled among the trees, with a porch light casting a soft glow. Instinct screamed at me to keep driving, but I was out of options. I hadn't seen another road, another vehicle, another person for miles. I pulled up to the cabin, cutting the engine, and took a deep breath. Maybe someone there could help, or at the very least, let me use a phone. As I stepped out, I noticed how quiet it was. No wind, no animals, just a heavy silence that felt almost unnatural. I approached the door and knocked, my hand trembling slightly. Seconds passed, then the door creaked open a few inches, revealing an older woman with sharp, watchful eyes. She looked at me, expression unreadable. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice low and wary. I explained my situation, feeling foolish but desperate, hoping she'd understand. She studied me for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Come in," she said, stepping aside, "but don't touch anything." I entered, and the cabin's interior was sparse but clean, with simple furniture and a faint smell of wood smoke. The woman offered me a chair, and I sat, noticing how she kept a close watch on me. After a few minutes of silence, she spoke again. "You shouldn't be out here alone," she said, her voice tinged with something I couldn't place: concern, maybe, or fear. "People disappear in these woods." I shivered, remembering the gas station attendant's warning. I nodded, muttering, "I just need to get back to the main road." She didn't respond right away, her gaze shifting toward the window. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "There are things in these woods that don't want to be seen. It's best to leave before dark." My skin prickled, and a chill ran down my spine. I thanked her, making an excuse about needing to get back on the road. Her eyes lingered on me, as if she was deciding whether to say something more, but she only nodded. I practically ran back to my car, my heart pounding as I started the engine and pulled away from the cabin. I didn't stop, didn't look back, just drove until I found a familiar road, a connection to the world beyond the woods. To this day, I don't know who or what was out there that night. I only know that every instinct in my body told me to leave. And I've never ignored my gut since.